Hello, my name is Francisco Bushtin, and I'm the Vice President of Grants, Programs, and Communication at Horizons Foundation. I will be the moderator for this evening, and welcome to the inaugural forum, Horizons Forum, the evolution of what was known as the Q series, pre-pandemic times. We know that Horizons Forum will be a place to learn, share, and discuss some of the leading issues in the LGBT community, sometimes local issues, national and international. We also know that at times the forum may focus on difficult topics, other times on topics that lift us all, and other times on topics that are provocative, but always grounded in Horizons values, especially pride. And at the Horizons, we see pride in our community and in its vibrant diversity, and celebrate our identities, our culture, our commonalities, and our differences. We welcome all of you to the first Horizons Forum, and I'm looking forward to being able to be in person at some point. But until then, Zoom it is. A couple of housekeeping items. Please make sure your mics are turned off, but most important, feel free to use the Q&A tool to submit questions for the panelists at any time. We will try to get to as many of your questions as possible. So let's get started. The topic for this forum is deplatforming LGBTQ hate, stopping conversion therapy online. The topic of conversion therapy, also known as SOGI change efforts, or for the religious fundamentalists and far-right conservatives, as Pray the Gay Away and the latest edition, Pray the Trans Away. The topic is broad, and there's also so many aspects that we can cover in our discussion. The following quote from Victor Madrigal Borlos, the UN Special Rapporteur on SOGI, in his 2020 report on conversion therapy provides a good contextual background, and I apologize for the long quote, but it really sets the stage that these interventions exclusively target LGBT+ persons with a specific aim of interfering in their personal integrity and autonomy because of sexual orientation and gender identity do not fall under what is perceived by certain persons as desirable norms. The practices are inherently degrading and discriminatory and rooted in the belief that LGBT+ persons are somehow inferior and that they must at any cost modify their orientation or identity to remedy that supposed inferiority. Other UN agencies, medical associations, and even the courts have at times described conversion therapy practices as amounting to torture, fraud, and as being unethical. The psychological and physical harm of conversion therapy are extensive, from suicidal incidents, substance use, depression, anxiety, and so on. Beyond the harm that conversion therapy survivors have to endure for a lifetime, there's also a cost to families and to the larger community, but especially to the LGBT community. How extensive is still the practice, you may ask? Well, in a Williams Institute report in 2018, they estimated that 698,000 LGBT adults have undergone conversion therapy. Further, they estimated that another 20,000 LGBT youth between 13 and 17, ages 13 and 17, will receive conversion therapy from a licensed healthcare professional. And that's a licensed healthcare professional before reaching 18. And double that, almost triple actually, 57,000 youth between ages 13 and 17 will receive conversion therapy from religious or spiritual advisors also before reaching 18. The last point after, and we'll move to the topic for today. The last data point that I want to share with you was a JAMA Pediatrics study that was just released last month, March 2022, which began to codify the effects that therapy among LGBTQ youth in the US have in terms of the economic cost. And it's in the billions of dollars each year. Actually, to be precise, their study found $9.23 billion annually is the cost of conversion therapy in the US. So besides just it's a horrible, degrading practice, the economic impact, we're beginning to measure that. So one of the things that I want to provide a little more context is like, why is it Horizons has moved into anti-conversion therapy space, especially the online conversion therapy space? We know through some of our grant making that we've been funding services. So folks that are survivors of conversion therapy can access those services and begin to heal. But why the online conversion therapy space? Well, the work is being funded by the Global Faith and Equality Fund at Horizons. The fund is a 17-year initiative, now in its 9th year. One of the primary focus of this initiative is to stem the exportation of LGBTI hate from the US to the global South, especially by religious fundamentalists based in the US. The fact that tech and social media companies, not all, but one too many, most of which are based in the San Francisco Bay Area, are still vectors of exportation of conversion therapy, providing the economic platforms and incentives and hosting and amplifying hate and misinformation of LGBTI people. Well, it is something that really falls within the strategy for this fund, which is the stemming the exportation of hate to the global South, and in this case, to other states and through all of our communities globally. So this leads us to today's topic and the findings, as well as the changes that have taken place since the report we're going to discuss this evening has been released. Let me introduce two amazing individuals who I've had the privilege to be in community for a number of years on different projects. From the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism, I would like to welcome Wendy Villa and Heidi Birch. And we're dropping links to their bios in the chat, so I'm not gonna go through their extensive bios. But let me just say that if I'm ever in a dark alley or in the recesses of the dark web, these two individuals are the ones that I want to have my back. There are fears, and yes, the work that they do through the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism is just amazing. So let me turn it over to Wendy and Heidi to talk about some of the findings of the report, very high level findings. And welcome.
Thank you, Francisco. That might be the nicest introduction I've ever gotten. I really appreciate it. Let me just share my screen real quickly here. Okay. Does it look okay? Wendy, give me a thumbs up. So thank you so much. I want to thank Horizons, the Global Fund. It's a pleasure to be here, and all of you for being here today. Before I turn this over to my colleague, Wendy, to talk about the specific report we did on conversion therapy, I just wanted to introduce our project for a second. So we co-founded the Global Project Against Hate and Extremism about 2 years ago, after many years of working at the Southern Poverty Law Center, both of us, and much of our work there focused around fighting against anti-LGBTQ hatred. So this is a topic that's very near and dear to our hearts. Our new project exposes hate movements that are transnational, does work to stop the export of hate from the United States to other places. And we work in sort of a few buckets, one of which is tech work, which you'll get a whole explanation of when Wendy starts talking. But we also work on documenting hate and extremism, policy issues. We're involved in quite a few coalitions to fight back against extremism. And I just want to say that part of the reason that we started this new project is these problems are now transnational. Obviously, in the tech world, they are. And as far-right extremism spreads across the world, it is a threat to everything that matters in terms of people's rights in different places. Far-right extremists are attacking the LGBTQ community. They're attacking Muslims, Jews, Black people, et cetera, et cetera. It's all about restricting the rights of all these populations. And, you know, our mission is to protect flourishing, inclusive democracies. And so we believe it's fundamental to take on far-right extremism, or that is not, we're not going to have inclusive democracies that flourish. And we also won't be able to take on many other challenges that are out there, things like climate change, for example, which will be stunted by rising far-right extremism in various places. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Wendy to talk specifically about our work on conversion therapy.
Hi, everybody. I'm so glad for you to be here tonight, and thank you. So as Heidi mentioned, we do work in different areas around far-right extremism. In January, we released these two reports. One is about conversion therapy online, the ecosystem, which looked at really the search options. Like anytime you went to look for information about conversion therapy, what were you going to find? And then we released a report. We actually had so much information, we had to make it two reports. And the second one ended up profiling the providers that we ran across most often during the course of our research. The reason we took, in addition to what Heidi said, and the reason we took this on is because conversion therapy is a global problem, and there's lots of good work being done to curb it or stop it, but nobody had really looked at the intersection of conversion therapy and the tech world. So we wanted to see what we were going to find. We had some ideas, but we felt like we needed to do this project, obviously with the support of Horizons. Additionally, we look at conversion therapy as a health disinformation issue. It is not different than COVID. They do not allow misinformation and disinformation about COVID. And given that every major medical association has discredited conversion therapy, we believe it's in the same vein. And just, we can talk more about it later, but some of the companies agreed with us. So we did the report. We looked at 6 countries and 4 languages. We did the United States, Colombia, Ireland, Kenya, Australia, and Germany. We looked at the 4 languages. We looked at English and Spanish in the US, Spanish in Colombia, English in Ireland and Australia, and German in Germany, and then English and Swahili in Kenya. And the reason for this is because we knew that the tech companies, and when I say tech companies, I'm talking about Google, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and for this project, we added Bing, Alexa, and Amazon, because those 3 companies have had practically no pressure about their content moderation. And having done this research, we're very glad we did it, because we discovered just sort of how bad the problems are over there. So in the report, in the research, we looked at, like, for example, how do people find this information? And we also looked at, advertisements and how the algorithms recommended content. So the quick takeaways from all of this research is that a couple of years ago, all the companies and the big 4, Google, Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, said that conversion therapy, they considered it in the same vein as hate speech, and that they were going to address it. So in our research, what we found is that they basically did do an adequate job when it came to, like, if you type in conversion therapy, what do you get? And for the most part, you get authoritative information. This is in English. Let me just say that. For the most part, you get authoritative information, and then the sort of the providers or the dangerous information is pushed down on the search pages. Same thing in Facebook and Twitter. When they both have search functions. If you search for conversion therapy, you get basically authoritative information. But here's the problem. People who are looking to find out about conversion therapy, or people who are being pressured to engage in conversion therapy, or for whatever reason they're doing it on their own, or their parents are pressuring them to do it, they don't necessarily look up conversion therapy. They look up things like, is it a sin to be gay? I don't want to be gay anymore. And when you put in those terms, and in addition to, like, we had another dozen terms or so that we searched during the project, the results are not good at all. So for the companies who said, yes, we'll do conversion therapy, but they just kind of did conversion therapy and stopped. The other thing we found, and we suspected as much, is that the non-English language results were not going to be as good as the English results. What we also found is that the farther you got away from the United States, say, you crossed the Atlantic and made it into Ireland, but then you went down to Kenya, or then you went over to Australia, the farther away you got, the worse the results were in English. And in Swahili, they were virtually unmoderated. It was vile and dangerous, what we found there. We did the research in English. English is the language of Kenya. So is Swahili. Millions of people speak Swahili all along East Africa. Again, if you put in conversion therapy, the results were basically adequate in Kenya. But when you did the research in Swahili, you got, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe just how bad the information that was returned was. There were all of the results sent people either to providers, or they sent them to websites where it said that LGBTQ people were diseased or dangerous, or were going to hell. I mean, just every single thing you can think of. And I would say it was about 95% of the content. Worst of all, when you read the Wikipedia page about conversion therapy, or I think the term was actually homosexuality. It combined all of that vile information into one place. And the reason this is a really big problem is because almost Wikipedia results, if there is a Wikipedia entry, if you put in a term, it is almost always in the first 3 or 4 results that you get. When you go search something on Google and you click on Wikipedia, because it's going to have like the most compiled information. It's generally been authenticated, because it's a community that puts in the information and checks the authors, and the tech companies use it as an authoritative source. But when you go to Swahili, you get completely unauthoritative information. It is up high on the rankings, and if the tech companies are using it as a source, then they're getting wrong information. So I know we can talk a lot more about everything we found there in a little while. One of the ways that we try to get the tech companies to move, to make changes to their policies, or to actually enforce their policies, in addition to publishing, research and publishing, and lobbying the tech companies and doing policy work to get the policymakers to pay attention. We obviously also try to get press, because they do not like press attention at all. And so these are just 3 examples. I think it's interesting that you had a business outlet, you had a political outlet, and then we were very glad to see that we got some attention in the UK and Ireland because of the conversion therapy bill that was set to be passed. 2 of them were set to be passed over there. Additionally, 2 of the big European providers or networks are in Ireland and the UK. So we were very gratified. We had some really good immediate results. This is just a sampling of what's been taken down, either on Facebook, on Twitter, either be Apple apps, PayPal, just a range of the different outlets that there are. So a couple of important ones here is Core Issues Trust, which we'll talk more about. It's the outfit out of Northern Ireland that was influencing the UK. IFTCC, another one that is made up of therapists. And then down here is Reintegrative Therapy Association. So when we undertook this project, Heidi and I had worked on, I'm sure most of you are familiar with the name Joseph Nicolosi, but Heidi, in our careers, we have worked on his group and associated groups, trying to get to marginalize their false narrative. Well, he died a couple of years ago, but his son, Nicolosi Jr., has taken up the mantle, so to speak, the family business. And one of the big things that happened was we got all of his videos deplatformed from YouTube, and he was livid. And this is just one of the editorials that he got published. There were a number of them, and a number of the big Christian organizations backed him. In our view, that means that what we're doing is working. So all of this research, I know you all have access to the reports, and there's a lot of information there, but if you, I encourage you to try to read them. But our basic recommendations are to, we want all of the algorithms for all of the companies to start including the terms that we have in the report, primarily unwanted same-sex attraction and reintegrative therapy. Because if you go look, all the searching that you do, either websites or on the social media accounts, none of these outfits, none of these organizations use the term conversion therapy. They all use unwanted same-sex attraction. And that's how the companies can fix their algorithms to de-rank that information. So that is primary. We have a list of the terms in the reports. We want the companies to make investments in all languages to combat conversion therapy. They are notorious for doing very little work outside of the US. But in addition to the language competency, they need to have cultural competency. We want the, when the search results come in, we want the authoritative information to be at the top and the disinformation to be on the second or third page, just as it is with conversion therapy now. And then obviously we want to deplatform from social media, the providers. And most importantly, they need to work with civil society to understand this landscape, because the providers are very sophisticated. They use the internet in a sophisticated way, and they are able to rebrand themselves, come up with new terms to get around whatever steps have been taken to limit their influence. One thing I forgot to mention is that in the countries, when we did Germany, I don't know if you know, but conversion therapy is banned in Germany, and they have very strict hate speech laws. There was almost nothing about conversion therapy in Germany. So we had one group from Switzerland that kind of creeped in, but to us, that is, if there is a will, there is a way. And so we will be saying that a lot as we continue to work with the companies. All right. So just a high level overview, and we'll be able to answer questions and get into it a lot more in depth in just a minute.
So I'm just going to add a couple of things. We perceived of this report as the first step in a process. So we will be lobbying the companies to make these changes that we've talked about here. That means search companies, social media companies, to stop the kinds of rabbit holes that drive people into more and more conversion therapy work. We're going to be watching all of these guys, working with Wikipedia. We're also lucky that we're probably going to do a project with Open Democracy that will look at many more countries and different languages to see what the situation is in those places and hopefully push for change. And also we're working with a lot of our partners to serve as a pressure mechanism for all these various companies. Just as an example, GLAD was able to influence TikTok to make some good changes related to the trans population, LGBTQ stuff, and they used our report to also help ban conversion therapy there. So we just see this as the beginning of a campaign to make sure that when somebody searches, especially young people, for conversion therapy, that they get results that tell them how dangerous it is, what it is, the right material, so that they can make informed decisions. So with that, I will turn it back over to Francisco and stop my share.
Thank you so much, Wendy and Heidi. And I encourage folks to drop questions in the Q&A. I do have a couple questions and dive a little deeper into the report. So let me start by asking in terms, I know when we first met this right before the pandemic in our office at Horizons, we started to talk about 3 countries, and then halfway through the project, 2 more countries were added. So can you share with us the rationale for the 5 countries and how we ended up with those countries?
Yes, of course. We when we initially started looking at the project, it was really important to us that we come to it with the appropriate language competency, because we knew that was going to be an issue. So we had Australia, Ireland, and United States. We also knew that there was quite a bit going on in Ireland and Australia, a lot of US activity in those areas. But then we thought, well, wait a minute, Germany, they have banned it, and they have these strict hate speech laws. So what does that look like? And because we knew for some of our other work that the companies do not always follow the rules, their own rules and the laws of the countries, is when things can be shown or not. And then we looked at Colombia, and we learned a lot actually from that. It really hit home that when content is moderated, it needs to be done by a person who not only speaks the language, but understands that particular culture, understands that vernacular. So the results in Colombia were different than in Spanish, were different than the US results in Spanish. And then finally in Kenya, the national language is English, but millions and millions of people speak Swahili. And we felt like we needed to look at a language that isn't as widely spoken as, say, English or Spanish or French or Chinese or whatever. So that's how we got to it. So we wanted to have sort of have information from different parts of the world in different languages to sort of suss out our suspicions about what was going to happen.
So you mentioned that the Colombia, Spanish, and also the US was done in Spanish and English. What I found interesting was the differences of the results in Spanish in Colombia and in the US. And can you talk a little bit about that, about the differences in those results in Spanish in the US, Spanish in Colombia?
Yeah, I'll answer that one, Francisco. Part of the reason we did Spanish in 2 places was to see if you got the same weird results that you get, say, in the difference between English results in the United States and English results in Australia, where they become less authoritative the further you get away from the Bay Area, basically. And the same kind of thing was happening with Spanish, interestingly enough. The Colombian results were very, very different from the Spanish language in the United States. The other thing we learned is that the cultural competency of the companies as to Spanish itself is lacking. In other words, they don't understand that there are, the dialect, the words that are used in Colombia are different than are in Mexico, or different than are in the United States. And it seemed like they were just layering over all Spanish content. I don't know, somebody from the United States probably is a speaker. So that was really important to us to be able to understand what was going on. And I'll just add, we also briefed the Hispanic Congressional Caucus about these issues because they're very concerned with Spanish disinformation, not just on conversion therapy, but also on vaccines, on elections, a whole broad range of things. So this issue of language competency, cultural competency is an important one.
So sticking with the language competency, I talked to several of my colleagues in the international funding arena. Were there any other studies that were done in Swahili, which is one of the primary languages spoken across different countries in Africa? Nobody, at least studies on Swahili or on conversion therapy, and nothing has come up. And the findings were so alarming. I guess the question is, what surprised you or didn't surprise you when you got to those findings? That, it sounds like there's a trend, right? The farther you get away from Silicon Valley, the worse it is. But then here we're dealing with a language that's not really spoken as much in the US, like Spanish. What surprised you about the Swahili, or what didn't surprise you about those results?
I think the thing that surprised us the most was that they were as bad as they were. We expected there to be some differences. We expected there to be disinformation, but we did not expect for there to be virtually no moderation by any of the companies in Swahili. And I'll tell you what, we had a wonderful researcher who runs an on-the-ground community program there in Nairobi. And she is involved in conversion therapy on a regular basis. And when she did the research, she was shocked. So that was, I don't even really know how to describe it. But it is the weakest point of the tech companies. Their inability to moderate content in anything besides really English, but certainly in languages that don't have hundreds of millions of speaking instead of tens of millions, right?
Hey, can I just add to, besides the Wikipedia page, which Wendy mentioned earlier, which is horrific, the other thing that we found was a lot of propaganda coming out of Russia.
Oh, yeah.
That is horrifying. In particular, a website whose name is -lgbt.ru. So it parades as though it's something good, right, for the community. You get on that thing and you cannot believe the hate speech. It's horrific.
Yeah, and it creeped in at the oddest time. So we can talk more about Russia in a minute.
Russia. So I think it was interesting, right? Because even it was at least the German, the results in German were also the one that was coming in from Switzerland, and then Russia. Those were the two.
Yeah.
Interesting. Let me switch a little to social media, because I think there's a title in the report that's the social media rabbit hole. I think it's brilliant, the title for that section. And I think at least the findings kind of mimic some of the things that were heard in congressional testimony in terms of the social media rabbit hole. Can you, some of the findings that we heard around eating disorder and body image, can you unpack the social media rabbit hole? Because I think that's a standout piece of this report in terms of how quickly somebody can find themselves in just hate. This dispute against LGBT folks.
Well, here was the thing about the rabbit holes on Facebook and Twitter, the social media platforms. Ostensibly they ban conversion therapy, so which is not, it's not at the place where it needs to be, right? But there are some groups that were taken down a couple of years ago that pushed this stuff. But the weird thing is once you hit on a conversion therapy outfit, everything that those platforms presents you in terms of you might also like this, check this out, look at this video, is all more conversion therapy material. And you end up in a world that's just one bad thing after another after another. I have to say, for me, the first time I started noticing these rabbit holes was actually when it came to white supremacy and neo-Nazi content back in the unregulated days, where you just get driven into the darker parts of the web as you go down this. And it's a big problem. It's a really big problem because you would think that's all that exists, right? Because you're popping from one conversion therapy provider to another. You're not getting anybody saying, wait a minute, this is bad stuff. This is problematic. Anyhow, so it's something that we feel strongly we have got to break those rabbit holes apart if we're going to protect users. It's just too much harm comes from this.
And probably, I'm going to guess that those rabbit holes are even worse in non-English languages, and as we get away from Silicon Valley.
There's no question.
So I'm going to start this question with acknowledging what all is new, right? In this case, the rebranding of conversion therapy away from the Christian fundamentalist principles of pray the gay away or pray the trans away, back to pathological causes and psychotherapy cures of same-sex attraction and gender nonconforming. So in this instance, and I know this is a big deal. Can you talk about the wolf in sheep clothing, which is reintegrative therapy?
Yeah, we did a lot of work into reintegrative therapy, obviously because we knew that Nicolosi had, he had founded North. He's considered the father of conversion therapy, and his son is sort of continuing on, except for he does some things that are different. He is a licensed therapist. He has clients, but he also has a network of therapists across the world. And I can tell you that since the pandemic, it has gotten worse, because where he might not have had as much access to people in other countries, now with everybody living virtually and doing Zooms, he is able to connect with even more people, more therapists and more potential sort of clients, I say with air quotes. And so what he says is that he does not try to change anyone's orientation. That is absolutely not the case. It is a happy byproduct of his treatment of past trauma. And past traumas are, only people, not only, but most people who are LGBTQ have had some kind of trauma. A lot of it is being abused as a child. A lot of it is mother issues. These are the things he puts on his websites, or father issues. One of the videos he had was somebody who had experienced a dog bite. It's just, it just goes on and on. And I believe, and so he says this, he thinks that, or my understanding is that he thinks that if we take the ability of therapists to provide conversion therapy away, if it's banned either legislatively or criminally, because some people consider it fraud, like we do, then we're doing a disservice to the LGBTQ community who desperately wants help. Not understanding, or maybe he does understand, but of course, were the world and society not the way it is, they wouldn't, people wouldn't need to be concerned about going through conversion therapy. And so one of the reasons that we focus on reintegrative therapy, as I said, is because he's very connected to all of these worldwide organizations, but he is determined to build this practice where he licenses people, other therapists, in the reintegrative therapy practice. So in other words, for David Pickup in Texas to practice reintegrative therapy, he has to go through a class and be licensed by Joseph Nicolosi. And then, so it's like a pyramid thing. That is his business. I believe that he believes it deeply. I think he believes what he's saying, but it is also a business. And with the number of conversion therapy bans that are being introduced, it's a problem for him. And it was a big deal when Canada it was a really big deal to the US industry when Canada banned conversion therapy a couple of months ago. So we had to show all of the ins and outs of reintegrative therapy in order to show the tech companies that it was on a par with conversion therapy. But as I say, Nicolosi denies this. But his videos that were on his website, I don't think any reasonable person could watch them and not understand that the goal of those sessions was to change someone's orientation. They were bad. I mean, I don't know how to describe it. You can see them now because he went and got them hosted by Odyssey, which is sort of the YouTube. I mean, Odyssey is like the Parler or Telegram for YouTube. So that's who's hosting them right now.
Oh, making friends. And yeah, the interesting thing is, right, he's also based in California, in Southern California.
Yes, he is. And he has testified. He testified in front of the California Assembly about conversion therapy bans. He testified when it was fraudulent. And so that's another story. I mean, that's another aspect of this, but it's the policy work that's going into this.
So there's a nice segue into the second part of the report, the profiling of the 25 providers. I will not be sending them holiday cards for sure, but and we know it's not an exhaustive list, but it's the top ones that you will get when you search, right, in English, German, Spanish, or Swahili. What stood out for me, that part of the report was, there's a sentence that says that these organizations are interconnected with each other and are essentially composed of 3 major networks. And I know that you guys referenced the one in Ireland, but can you just briefly mention those?
Yeah, I mean, I should say that, we only looked at providers who have a presence online. Lord knows how many, are out there. But what's important about that is that if somebody searches for one of those and we can get authoritative material up there, maybe that severs them from, going down the conversion therapy road. So what we found was these, 25 groups that came up over and over again, and they were basically made up of 3 networks. One was an American-based network that circles around Nicolosi and Narth in the United States. And then there was another network whose main player was the Core Issues Trust in Northern Ireland. It was like an Ireland, UK, Europe network. These 2 networks were, for the most part, people who considered themselves sort of licensed therapists. And then there's a global network that goes under the name, Exodus something, Exodus Brazil, Exodus Mexico, et cetera, which is actually a part of the Catholic Church, has a formal recognition by the Catholic Church, and is functioning in many, many parts of the world. That's a whole other network. And that is one that's actually, there was quite a bit of evidence from other countries of them engaging in some rather unsavory practices for their quote unquote therapy. So you have these 3 big networks that are basically responsible for most of the thinking about conversion therapy, most of the licensing of therapists, and so on. And these are the people who, from our perspective, need, when someone searches for them, need for the information to come up from the many, many people, medical providers, others who have pointed out what is so wrong and so dangerous about this practice.
Interesting. It's all connected, and in that spirit, the one last question I had about the report, and I know we, through other projects we talked about this, right? The web or the ecosystem that this far right extremist anti-LGBT folks sit in, and we know that that they are constant forces and actors and millions of dollars, conservative donors, lawyers, etc., that support. They're the background of sustaining this infrastructure. What echoes, if not outright presence, of some of the other anti-LGBTI rights groups, or did you find in the research, or or some linkages? Just like I know in your other work you found some echoes of white supremacists and nationalist movements. you know, and everything intermingled. It's really like a ball of hate that these people live in. But can you tell us a little bit, you know, did you see echoes or evidence? I know it was in the Jonah case of who defended that particular piece, who were the lawyers were, but can you tell us a little bit about any echoes of some of the white nationalist anti-LGBT groups?
Yeah, there's quite a bit. I don't know if we mentioned, but we did a report on the Alliance Defending Freedom and how they export hate to Eastern Europe, Central and Eastern Europe. And that had its own network, right? So you have like layers and layers of networks. And there are definitely connections between some of the big groups or the sort of the legal outfits like Alliance Defending Freedom or Liberty Counsel, Heritage. There are a number of connections there. What we found, I mean, while it wasn't necessarily like we couldn't actually find we didn't see a connection between Alliance Defending Freedom and Liberty Counsel and say Brothers Road in Texas. But a Venn diagram would show you how all of these groups are connected. But what we did see, and it's a little bit to the side of it, but we couldn't help but see it, is all these anti-LGBT and anti-trans bills that have been introduced in the United States in the last year. I mean, I think we're at what, like 300 or so across the US now. There's a lot of connection there between the people, like the communities that are introducing the bill. So like an Alliance Defending Freedom might write some sample legislation and give it to, I'll say Brothers Road again in Texas, because I know that he has also testified, the guy that runs it, he's testified in front of the Texas Assembly and get bills introduced that way. So they sit up here at the national and international stage, but they provide materials for the folks who work sort of locally, that work in their own capitals, in their own states, to get bills passed with legislation. Additionally, some of these groups have international presences, like Exodus that Heidi was talking about. They're everywhere. And I feel we kind of have to say that obviously there's the World Congress of Families, there's NOM, there's all these other groups that we specifically did not look at because their remit is so broad. You know, we were trying to keep it to conversion therapy, but once you start adding on those layers, and especially when you get into that policy realm, they're all connected.
Yeah, I mean, there's the poison pill that was introduced in the UK ban, right, that they're trying to fix. There's a religious exemption to it, and then I know one of the Atlantic states, I think it's one of the Carolinas, has a religious exemption bill around conversion therapy right now in the legislation. And if you look behind it, who's supporting that, who's underwriting that? It's all just interconnected.
Let me give you I was just going to give you an update on UK. So just for folks who didn't know, the UK, the Parliament had promised to get a conversion therapy ban through, and Core Issues Trust and IFTCC, these are the big therapist-based networks that are international, for the first time ever got audiences and briefings with MPs. They went into a period of review, or consultation, they call it. And supposedly when they came out, they were going to pass this bill, but the bill died. So it's a blow. It's a big blow, but it shows when these folks put their minds to it and they have the resources provided to them by a legal staff, what can happen.
Interesting. Before we go into the impact, I want to take a couple of questions that have been submitted and bring our audience in, and I encourage folks to submit even more questions. The first one is, isn't conversion therapy in reality child abuse too?
Well,
Well,
yes.
you're not, yes, you're not going to get any complaints for us. I think that that story that you put up at the beginning from the Williams Institute kind of lays that, if anybody who hasn't read that report, it talks about the rates of suicide attempts. You know, it's just horrible what this is. And the special rapporteur for the UN says it's tantamount to torture. So, I mean, I think that that's, to think that this is practiced on children anywhere is outrageous.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. It's disappointing. Some of the language has not been as strong from some organizations that I would think will have a stronger stance against conversion therapy. So another question that we had was, and I'll start by the acclamations. Thank you all. This has been incredible insight. How can broader LGBTQ organizations support the momentum behind this cause, especially arts organizations for whom conversion therapy might not be a core focus or competency? And I can start with that.
Okay.
Yeah, let me throw in my 2 cents here for what it's worth. So especially, we know survivors of conversion therapy is a long life journey to healing and just feeling whole. And one of the things is the power that art can have, both in art therapy, but also the power of art just documenting the stories and the truth, and really providing the truth, a truth of what these folks have gone through if they choose to share it. But there's something there around this. I know Hollywood has had several movies like that in the past. There's several LGBTQ directors that have done movies, but I think there's a room here for the art folks that may not think this is not me or this is not in the bailiwick, where I'm thinking that definitely are LGBTQ youth organizations. Trevor Project has been one of the leaders around this, but it's very different in the international space around this. But love to hear any. Those were my 2 bits. Let me ask you.
Well, my thought was that the arts community could do so much good work by representing this in a way that people can understand it and digest it and react to it. As I'm very proud of the reports we did, but that's a dredge, right? It doesn't pull at the heartstrings in the way that art can do. And I could imagine visual, video, all these different things would bring this to life for people to understand how serious this really is.
Yeah, the stories are always the best way to get people to understand, and anybody in the arts community knows that. But one thing I think is important for people to understand is that conversion therapy, some folks, that term has sort of been tainted, as the conversion therapists say, and that's why they don't want to use it anymore. But it isn't. We need people to understand and remember that it's not always a physical torture or somebody being locked into a room or electroshock therapy. It's much more subtle, but just as dangerous. And being able to tell those stories. So it's not necessarily, it's the story of the mind and the process.
Yeah. The one other question that just came through is, do you see pro-conversion therapy movement growing? Are we seeing that? And I know we had this conversation, right? Because this project literally was November before the pandemic. I said, we're gonna do this, right? And the pandemic hit and we're like, oh, everybody's online now. Let's really do this and let's dive into this. So the urgency was even more, but in the time that you were working, did you see a growth in pro-conversion therapy movement? And are there places that may have, that you said, were like, oh, that's something to look after, or that we should be concerned?
Well, I do think, I don't know about overall growth, but what you see are the factions that are they are growing and getting stronger and stronger. Like there might be just as many people who would be opposed to it, but that they don't have the influence that the groups who promote it do? I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who are part, especially of these ministries, that all they do is, their mission right on their website is to say, we're here to fix the sexually broken. Click here if you are transgender, click here if if you're gay. And the division, the polarization in our country and in other countries, and let's just, obviously the invasion in Ukraine has changed where people's attention are, but Poland and Hungary, for example, those countries are very polarized, and they are polarized around LGBT rights, and conversion therapy goes right along with it. So yeah, I think there is a growth because you have a far right extremism problem particularly in obviously in the US, but also in some of the European countries, particularly Eastern and Central Europe. Not to mention what's going on. You have some of the same issues in South America and Brazil with Bolsonaro, obviously in Africa. So I guess I'm talked a lot to say, yes, it's a growing problem. Yeah. Heidi, did you want to add? Yeah.
I was just going to say, with the aggressive efforts by American groups to export hate against LGBTQ community, this is always a handmaiden. And as we see democracies becoming increasingly illiberal, it's always this community, and often women, who are the targets, right, in terms of their rights, to have taken away. And conversion therapy for these people is necessary because it's the way they get away with the discrimination, right? If they can make the argument that people can change, then they're not just raging bigots who want to harm people, right? Because there's this easy solution. And I have to say, I mean, I know from the research that we did by work by other organizations who've done stuff here, I think this problem is very serious in China, for example, in parts of the Muslim world. It's not just Christian churches that are exporting it. So I don't think we know the half of it. And as long as discrimination against the LGBTQ community continues to increase in parts of the world, we're going to have more of this, unfortunately. That's why we need bans. We need a lot to be done to stop this abhorrent practice.
No, definitely. And one of the interesting things, because we also know the limitation of this report, right, that it's focused on the internet. And I think, as you guys said, conversion therapy takes different forms. There's a lot of work being done at the local level of conversion therapy practice that are more localized, whether it's here in the United States or internationally. I would point people to an amazing report by Outright International on this. It's just an amazing report looking at all the different variations. This report is really focused on the internet, and it's unique, and it's important because, in my opinion, it's one of the biggest vectors of exporting hate and sustaining hate, and, as you guys said, the rabbit hole of hate. But an interesting question came in, which is, this is a very heavy topic, an important one. Was there an inspiring moment during the research or something that felt like it brought any light to the subject?
Well, I have to say it is a heavy, distressing. I'll tell you who brought light, I think, to us. Our researcher in Kenya was like amazing. She was amazing. It was such a privilege to work with her. And we had, some other great people working with us on this project because we needed people in different locations, so it all worked out. But the Kenya experience for me was, it was just special because of, I don't know, she's just doing this work in such difficult circumstances. I don't know, Wendy. And then, of course,
well, I would have to say that Mathoni was a light in this project, and particularly because she was able to help us. She taught us a lot, and she was able to help us put the Kenyan situation, which, I mean, that doesn't even begin to describe it, but what's going on in Kenya in perspective. And so that was, I think that, we wouldn't be being completely honest if we didn't get some joy out of getting some folks deplatformed. Yes. It makes a difference. But what the real point, I mean, yeah, we would like all of them to be down, but our process, the tactics that we use is to use the company's rules, against them. And every time when you have a case that is as documented as this, you're going to have some quick wins, but then you have the longer term work to do, like with the algorithms and that kind of thing. But another bright spot, I would say maybe slightly dimmer than Muthoni, but was that because we have talked to all the companies and we have talked at length with them, and they know that we're coming back and they're willing for us to come back, is that there was some openness to making these changes, because Heidi and I also worked a lot, with online violent extremism, and we work in a lot of different areas. We don't always have that openness, so that was a bit of a bright spot.
I have to say, just for Wendy and I personally too, we have been, since our days at the Southern Poverty Law Center, trying to do something about conversion therapy. We were heavily involved in the lawsuit against Jonah, so doing something about this problem is sort of a thanks as well. I mean, this is just really, really important to us that this stop.
Thank both of you and your researchers, because I know, even during the pandemic in some countries, the researchers were also taking a risk of even doing this research. So let's turn a little bit to what has happened since the report was released, right? And the interventions that have been going on. So can you share with us how you've been using the report to try, in some cases, to deplatform, degrade less authoritative content, and have the companies enforce their bans or strengthen their algorithms? And I know it's been a lot of work, but can you share with us a few examples or stories, if possible?
Yeah. Well, I guess we could probably, because we'll probably come up with different things that pop to mind, Heidi. The search algorithms, that is a long-term project. It was a long-term project to get them to use conversion, to derank conversion therapy. So now it's going to be another long one to get them to add these words into their current algorithms. So the different strategies, we're never going to get rid of websites that promote conversion therapy. We are never going to get rid of conversion therapy information on a Google or Bing or Alexa search. But what we can do is get it to be like on the third or fourth page. 90% of the people don't go past the first page when you do a Google, I say Google, but any kind of search. What we can do is not have it on the first page. We cannot have knowledge boxes. We cannot have advertisements. And we can have Outright International's report right up top, or a Trevor Project report right up top. That's what we can do. We know it can be done, but it's gonna take time, because some of these things even once they change the algorithm, the system has to work. So one thing for all of our allies, I would encourage, when talking about this, even though it is unpleasant to use these terms like unwanted same-sex attraction, because when people use that term in a way that discredits what is being said about it, we sort of reclaim it, right? And so when you put the research, when you do a search on Google, then you're combining the multiple ways that term is being used with the algorithm results. And so you just end up with a better result. So again, long-term. Heidi, you want to talk about the social media?
Well, there's the social media companies where we need to make sure all the providers are off, because that's their policy, that they don't host this content. And then also make sure that there's no way, through the way the algorithms works, that you get looped into another provider. The best way to do that is to not have the providers on there, so there's no rabbit hole to go down, right? Mm-hmm. They also have internal search mechanisms that are pretty good, but not perfect, that we need to work on. We've also done work with PayPal to demonetize, get YouTube to stop running ads on this kind of thing. So we have a whole series of strategies, and I think the work with Wikipedia in other languages is going to be really important, because Wikipedia is almost always the first result when you search for something, no matter what language. So we need to get that information to be accurate, authoritative. I feel pretty good about, we've also worked on things like voice search, like Alexa, which is not good.
Well, let me say Alexa uses Bing. Bing has done the least amount of work on any kind of search moderation.
But we're talking to them.
But we're optimistic. We're optimistic.
So we just, we're going to have to keep pounding these nails to get this information as accurate as possible. And to do what Wendy said, which is when you search for whatever form of words you're using for conversion therapy, you get Outright's report, you get the Trevor Project, you get GLAAD, you get, the whole host of people who are going to tell, the UN Special Rapporteur, you're going to get, medical statements, which should turn the tide, right? It's got to, hopefully it will give someone pause about what they're doing. In fact, at the Outright report, we used a little section of it in our opener where they talked about a young man who had gone online searching for this material and got authoritative results and backed away. That's the story that we want to see.
That was in Australia.
Yeah, that's the future that we want to hope for.
Well, but just to add to that, Heidi, that story was in Australia. The story we included about somebody who did not get authoritative information, that went down a terrible rabbit hole and had a horrific experience. He was in Egypt, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So Arabic, another illustration of the problem.
I was trying to give a bright spot.
I'm sorry.
This is what the artist can build on. This could be let's make that future.
Sorry.
Well, yeah, you kind of mentioned a little bit about PayPal, and that's the e-commerce side of this, right? We know there's some folks that do it because they have deep religious beliefs, blah, blah, blah. But there's some folks that there's a monetary aspect to it, right? Whether it's the ads, yes, using the e-commerce platforms to run their business. And I know you guys were, in the other piece that was Amazon Cares, right? Some of these organizations are nonprofit, using Amazon Care to raise funds. So I guess the question is, e-commerce, which is a little bit different than the speech argument, free speech argument. E-commerce, and I know you all had some success also with the white supremacists and the neo-Nazis deplatforming them from the e-commerce sites. What was the reception, if you can share details or as much as you can share in terms of like tackling this problem from an e-commerce perspective?
Well, we had conversations with PayPal, and the process there is that we present our case. They're always very receptive to talking to us, but then they never tell us what is going to happen, right? We just have to go and see what happens. I believe that PayPal is a company that is trying to live its sort of stated values. It doesn't always work. They didn't get rid of everybody, but I can tell you that some of these organizations, just like a far-right or extremist group or a neo-Nazi group, they know they're going to get kicked off. So they either had it or they left, or they could have already been kicked off and we didn't know. But one thing that's interesting is that Core Issues Trust, which we did get them deplatformed, they had already lost PayPal, but they've also lost, they were with Barclays Bank out of the UK, and they had all their banking services cut off. That's how strongly some financial institutions will react to this. So I do think that, I don't know that there's ever going to be a situation that we will take away credit card privileges, but some of the companies just sort of self-identify to not use some of the platforms because they don't want to deal with the fact that it's going to be taken away, just like with some of their social media accounts.
Yeah. Excellent. I guess one last question, and I encourage folks to drop in more questions into the Q&A function. And I know when we started this project, we had a lot of conversations around the free speech argument, religious beliefs, religious exemption around this, the web, and I think it was a brilliant strategy to look at authoritative versus not authoritative results. And I think you guys mentioned a little bit in terms of that in English there seems to be quite a bit. Less in other languages. That said, what are some of the strategies or arguments in your intervention that you use with tech companies when you ask them to either deplatform or that I don't want to say degrade, but downgrade, or yes, ban some content?
Well, in the case of the social media companies, this was actually a rather simple thing. They had, for the most part, already made that decision for themselves. They just weren't doing it, right? They weren't doing the content moderation, which is an egregious problem in many, many ways, and especially once you get outside of English. So that wasn't so much convincing, other than to say you've already made a decision that this is essentially dangerous material, like health disinformation, that it can literally lead to people being harmed. And so in that case, it was more about showing the ways that they were failing to enact their own policies and trying to get them to comply. I think the search thing was a little different. I have to say, for all the people who work against online misinformation, disinformation, hate speech, and whatnot, tend to forget how important search is. It tends to get ignored. Everybody focuses on Facebook or they focus on Twitter, but most people in the world get their information from Google. So if we don't get Google right, if we don't get actual real information, it's going to poison people in a million different ways. And it's not just about conversion therapy. It's about all kinds of information. And so that was the one thing that's a little trickier, right? Because we had to go to the companies and say, look, your algorithm isn't working right. You don't have the expertise that you need to have on this topic and probably a whole lot of other ones. You need to work with civil society to understand the terms that are being used. And you've got to get the junk off the top of the page. You have a responsibility. If you are providing information to the world that's accurate, you need to fix this. And I'll tell you, Wendy and I have had a long experience of badgering Google. We went to their offices in, I think, 2013 or 14 to show them at that time that if you search for Martin Luther King Jr., all you got were hate sites. So it just shows you, and it was fixed very quickly.
Let me just jump in and say that, and they said that we were wrong as we were showing it to them on the computer, and that it couldn't be fixed.
Yeah, it was fixed.
We barely got back to Alabama before it was fixed.
It was fixed, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Done.
But
yeah.
So the point is, you have to keep pushing, and and it's going to take civil society. It takes efforts like this. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem fair. These companies make so much money. You think they could clean up their own content, but it takes civil society efforts to make those changes and push for them.
Well, if you're realizing a little bit, the fact that many of these companies are based in the San Francisco Bay Area, where a few studies said that the San Francisco Bay Area has the most LGBTQ folks per capita, which I were to translate that to the workforce in a lot of these companies. It makes me think, what does that mean? And what's the level of intervention? Well, not this study, but other level of intervention in terms of the workforce within the company, employees that they're literally supporting or working for companies that are exporting hate against their own community. We saw those interventions work in the anti-tobacco movement, which could be interesting. One other thing that I know that we had talked about further interventions happening. I know for Horizons, one of the follow-ups to this and further investment in this area that we're looking at is actually creating some authoritative content in different languages, which I think will be key, as well as creating authoritative content by progressive religious folks, which is the intersection of LGBTI rights and religion. So that's one of the things that we'll be looking at. I'm very conscious of,
that's very important,
that's really good.
Francisco. I mean, that's really important because we need the good stuff to get up to the top, and we need good stuff to be there, right?
yeah. We're at time. First, Heidi and Wendy, I on behalf of Horizons Foundation, on behalf of the Global Faith and Equality Fund and the community, thank you for such amazing work. Thank you for this conversation. I know it's a heavy topic, but it's a topic that I don't think, if we don't find the forum to have, that it's not going to happen. And I think the findings of the report are just amazing. And I'm glad that other organizations are looking at this, like Open Democracy and other folks, to get involved in just the exploitation of LGBTI hate online and how it lives there. So first of all, our partnership is just amazing, and thank you. And I look forward to continuing this work. I want to thank everybody who logged on, who will be watching this later. As I mentioned, it's the first Horizons Forum. We really want it to be community driven. So at some point in the near future, probably after this or tomorrow, you'll be getting a survey asking how this went, give us your feedback. And also we're going to ask, suggestions for future topics. We have a few lined up, but we want to hear from you, like what topics would you like for us to try to plan for in the Horizons Forum. We're looking at around 3 to 4 a year. Looking forward to being in person at some point, but until then, we'll stick with Zoom. And Heidi, when you guys want to give you any last words, or we're good?
We just want to thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Horizons.
I should have said a bright spot. Heidi kind of said it. A bright spot was actually doing the work. It is a heavy thing, and it did take a long. I mean, it wasn't easy, but it was very rewarding, and we are just grateful, and we're grateful to everybody here that came to listen tonight.
Well, thank you, everybody. Be safe, and looking forward to seeing you at the next forum. Have a good evening.
Bye.